And with that, I'd like to introduce Ken Smith, our speaker on best practices in supplier management. And I'll let you take it from here.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome everybody. I am Ken Smith. I'm with General Cable in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Appreciate everybody making it here. I myself was a little bit worried and looking for the room called Severance. Wasn't too sure, especially when my boss is sitting in the front row with a notepad. So, good. The topic we're here to talk about is supplier management and best practices in supplier management. Before we get into that, I just want to give you a little bit of background on General Cable, who we are, what we do. General Cable is a global company focusing on the manufacture of a variety of wire and cable for the world. General Cable Altoona is one of the plants that takes cable produced in the company and transfer it to a end product. And specifically, we produce ignition wire sets. They're the spark plug wires in your automobiles. Our business has been located in Altoona. We've been in operation for about 20 years. Actually just celebrated our 20th anniversary last year. And our primary business has always focused on ignition wire sets for the aftermarket. The customers that we include are AutoZone, Advanced Auto, O'Reilly's, not sure which outlets are in each of your given areas, but we do have some major representation there. We've also recently gotten into OEM manufacturing for General Motors. Likewise, we've also started to introduce ourselves into different applications, including marine, other customers such as the Postal Service, et cetera, et cetera. So, most of what I'm going to talk about when we talk about supplier management is going to be geared towards, or at least the examples will be based on, the aftermarket business and the materials that go into making ignition wire sets. As we go into it, though, I think it's important to understand that while we have maybe 8 years experience within that, leading up to a point where we introduced the OEM market, we had to reevaluate and reassess new suppliers and bring them in. And that started the package all over again. And then now with some of the additional business we're bringing in additional suppliers. So I guess one of the things that I want to point out to you is that even though we started our journey over 12 years ago and supplier integration was a major part of that, that journey does not end. There's going to be tons of twists and turns throughout the process. What I'm hoping that this group will get is just some examples of how we have integrated suppliers, different concepts, and an understanding of at least the baseline for how we went about it. One of the first questions is, why is supplier integration important? And it's important because you're integrating all of your suppliers in the direct delivery of your product to your customers. Your supply chain includes your suppliers, your manufacturing outfit, and your delivery to your end-use customers. Some say that the main goal of supply chain is to reduce inventories, but it's important to understand that's only if you are providing quality product to your customer and you have the materials available, readily available, to make sure you can supply that quality product to your customer. Our supplier integration process is a key element of our Altoona production system. As I mentioned, we started the lean journey over 12 years ago. Supplier integration actually happened right at that time. I mean, it was one of the major elements of our lean journey. It's something that was started right early on because we recognize that for us, the supply chain is integral to our Altoona production system, our operating systems. And it's focused, or it's linked specifically to our key performance measures or concerns, first and foremost being customer satisfaction. And a lot of that we tie into work order delivery, line fulfillment, either way you look at it, just getting that product quality to the customer on time when they need it. And for us, short cycle times was also critical. In our environment, we have, at this point now, over 8,000 SKUs, finished good SKUs. We've got over 1,000 different material SKUs. So in order for us to manage our capital, keep our finished good inventories low, we need to maintain short cycle times. And therefore, we need that flexibility and responsiveness within our supply chain in order to support that. RIP inventory turns, again talking about capital, the dollars tied up in that, asset utilization, and finally cost and plant productivity. And the supply chain is a key element of any cost structure. You're talking about not only the material costs, but all of the transactions that go behind development, administration and purchasing, the indirect labor associated with handling, et cetera, and as I mentioned, the main materials price. So in Altoona, as I'm imagining it is for most of the group here, materials is the primary component of cost for us. It's over 75% of our cost is in materials, the rest made up in labor and whatnot. So for us, materials was the largest opportunity, and that's why we included it so early on in Lean. Now, we're going to get into a lot of different concepts and talk through each of those. Basically going to provide some preliminaries, so there may be a number of questions later on, which I'll be happy to answer. But as you're thinking through this, and no matter what stage you are in supplier integration, whether you've not yet begun, whether you're midway there looking to take yourselves to the next level, our recommendation is that you really take the time to develop your strategy. Understand what you want to do. As we talk through the different components that can be included within that, look at which ones you want to include and at what phase you want to include them. Okay? You also want to think about, with each of those elements, what are you looking to get out of it? Are you looking for price? Are you looking for delivery? Are you looking for reliability? Are you looking for quality? Are you looking for overall cost, which is what we should be doing? What do you want to get out of it? And then likewise, what are you willing to give? Because one of the things that we're going to be talking about is supplier partnerships. Arranging a partnership with somebody who has a direct impact on you and your customer. There's going to be that give and take. You can't have a relationship unless it's a win-win one. So you may need to sacrifice one element that's not as important to you in order to gain one that is. So really think through that. And as we talk about these different elements, I'm going to bring that up again. Another thought you need to consider is that this is a long-term strategy. Okay? And I talked to that in terms of two things. The timeline in which to roll it out and implement it. This is not something that is going to be completed in a year. It's going to take 5 years, perhaps longer, as you get new suppliers, as your business changes. It's going to be an ongoing, continuing strategy. Okay? So this is a long-term effort. You need to manage that pace. The other thing you need to look at is that you want this to be a long-term relationship. The most value gained out of supplier integration is when you have developed those suppliers and you've worked together to refine your system over the long term. That's where you're going to get the main bang for the buck. And finally, get everybody on board. Okay? There may be one bright individual in your materials organization or your sourcing organization, supply chain organization that has this great idea for supplier integration. But one person alone is not going to make it happen, and unless that individual gets everybody on board, it's going to end quick, or there's going to be so many obstacles. You want to include people from the plant, manufacturing, material sourcing at the plant, the finance at the plant. You want to include your folks at your corporate office. Make sure that your strategy folds in with the company strategy, that it's a joint effort. If you do that up front, you're going to find yourselves being a lot more successful. You're going to get the support when you need it. You're going to get the support when you run over some of the bumps and the obstacles, and then encouragement to continue. The main concepts that we're going to be talking about today: supplier consolidations, supplier conferences, formal supplier report cards or a metric system, supplier technical reviews, lean relationships with your suppliers, inventory pull systems, and SMI. May also talk a little bit about SOI, or supplier-owned inventory, but the focus is on supplier management of inventory, and then infrastructure reductions. You'll notice that I'm talking about suppliers. This may be more a few years back, but it always used to be called vendor management, or your vendors providing you the materials. In our organization, we have made a concentrated effort to refer to our suppliers as suppliers. And the reason being is that vendors, even though there's no dictionary definitional difference or whatnot. There's a connotative one. There's a cultural one. Vendors, the way I look at it, you have limited frequency of purchases and buys. You have a limited relationship, and you're typically going for the best price. You're either going into a shop because you need to get something last minute, you're picking it up because there's a sale tag on it. Or the biggest example is the hot dog vendor. It's somebody, you go there for a hot dog, you really don't know the guy, it's probably a one-time deal, et cetera. But when you talk about suppliers, you're talking about a frequent provider relationship, somebody that you have a long-term relationship with, and you get the best overall cost. Take a look at it again. If you're looking at a couple items that you consider, you really don't care about price or quality or whatnot, you just need to get it and keep it in the household, you're going to go to any shop and pick it up. But I bet you most of you or your families have your favorite grocery store that you will always go to, even if there's another one down the block. I know I've got relatives that have stores built closer to them, bigger variety of stuff, but they will not go to them because they've set in mind they really like that supplier. They've developed that long-term relationship. They've got a broad offering. They know that they're getting quality. They know that when they go there, the product that they want will be on the shelves. And if not, they will get better service. Okay, so again, as we're talking about this, really focus on the supplier part of it, the long-term relationship. Talk to consolidations. Supplier consolidations does a couple things. It increases your leverage and reduces your supplier variation. It also sets the groundwork for future with the winners in your supply base. Okay? Again, what you're looking at is you're taking a supply base that may be include 100, 200 different suppliers. Sat through the presentation earlier where they had a supply base of 600 suppliers. And you're talking about reducing that number of suppliers, consolidating them down so you can increase your leverage, easier to build relationships, reduce the product variation, reduce the transactions, and improve your cost and service. Increase leverage. Most of us are in the manufacturing field or supply customers, correct? I would imagine that most of us also have one or two primary customers that make up maybe a good percentage, 25, 30%, 40% of your customer base, your volume or your revenue base, okay? If that's the case, and you have to set priorities on who gets the product, you're going to focus on that customer that gives you the most volume that you do not want to risk to lose. So when you consolidate your supply base, you are essentially putting majority of your business into a single supplier, and that supplier then will likely have you as their primary customer who they will do anything to satisfy, okay? You also get an opportunity to build relationships. As the EasyGo presentation earlier was talking about taking it down from 600 to 200. In our case, we took material suppliers from 26 down to roughly 13. What it does is it gives you an opportunity to spend more time with that supplier, going on plant visits, communicating with that organization, having them visit you. You have the time to build those relationships that you otherwise wouldn't. Reduce product variation. Even if you're purchasing the same part, there is going to be variations even if they're building it under the same spec. And reduced variation definitely helps your manufacturing processes. Reduced transactions, we're going to talk about a couple of things, SMI being one that allows you the opportunity to reduce transactions. But just think about it naturally. If you take 600 suppliers that are billing you on a monthly basis and you drop that down by a third or 2/3 down to 200, you've at least saved yourselves 400 times 12, 48,000. My math is very, very poor right now off the cuff, but you're saving yourself all those different transactions. You're cutting it down. So you're saving your administration people. You may even be able to lower your headcount or at least refocus them on more value-added things than paper pushing. Improve cost and service. Again, we'll talk through that more as we go. What I want to offer to you is, we call it one way to consolidate. And this is the method that the Altoona plant went through. And we're offering it to you as an example. It's not the best way to go. I can't tell you that it's right for every organization, but for us it worked. First and foremost is developed and fleshed out the long-term strategy. As we talked to earlier, you have to do this up front. You want to take a look at the entire package, really understand what your options are, understand what it's going to take to get there, and the timeline. You want to get all your stakeholders' commitment. As I mentioned before, your entire supply chain, your accounting and financial management folks, your plant operations, your Highland Heights corporate supply chain and sourcing groups, et cetera. Get everybody on board up front and determine what metrics you're going to use to evaluate. Again, you want to take a look at really understanding not only the metrics. You talk about service, quality. You can have the basic ones as far as fulfillment, whatnot. But you also want to understand what the priorities are, and is that measure truly needed to suit your intended vision, your intended strategy of the supplier relationship. Once you have that all in place, we recommend getting all of your category suppliers together in one room and lay out the strategy to them. And in Altoona's case, we brought, our material parts include wire, terminals, rubber insulators, the shelf carton, and the outer packaging. So in our case, rubber insulators. We got all of our insulator suppliers together, brought them into the same room, laid out the strategy to them, told them what our intentions to consolidate to the best overall supplier, the timeline we were expecting it, what we would consider to be or make somebody the best overall supplier, how we were going to rate and evaluate them, et cetera, et cetera. We also shared with them what the opportunities are for them. It's not, again, just about General Cable Altoona. This is about what's a win-win relationship. And we're telling the suppliers, we're going to expect a lot from you, but in return, we have a lot to offer. And that's including a committed partnership, that's included additional volume, additional revenues, and additional opportunities to improve their businesses. Once you've had that meeting, you start collecting the data, start collecting the information, and all of your stakeholders, or the key stakeholders, look at it and evaluate which of those suppliers fit into that long-term strategy. Once you've got that done, we recommend start soon, but manage the pace. That means as you've gathered your your suppliers together, you've told them what you're going to do. You've told them you're essentially going to be consolidating, so some of them may be out of business, some of them may be gaining business. You want to start soon and start with those consolidations so that folks can understand this is real. We are truly going down this path. We are truly going to show the suppliers that are of value, that we value them, and that we're moving in their direction. But of course, we want to manage the pace. You can't take 600 suppliers and drop it down to 200 in the matter of a week or a month with one decision. It's going to take time. You want to manage that so you're able to successfully consolidate within a given pace so that you are continually successful. So again, there are no doubts as to the future success of this program. Finally, one of the very important concepts with this is that you have selected the chosen few based on what they will offer to you, based on their ability to provide what you value. Okay? With the understanding is that if you're doubling the volume that you currently have with that supplier, they may not yet have the full capacity or capability to take that on. So you need to work with that chosen few and help them develop not only their capacity, but their capabilities to perform. If you've chosen these 4 items to be your key metrics, and there's a couple that, they don't do as good as some of the others, but that's the give and take. Well, here's your opportunity to help them develop in these categories as well, so that they continue to be that overall best supplier for you. In Altoona's case, early on we had 15 core suppliers, and again, I'm talking to just those core materials, the wire, the terminals, the insulators, our inner cartons and our outer packaging. I'm not talking about MRO supplies or expense items. All of those items can fall into a supplier partnership package, okay? And in fact, in our environment, most have. But what we're concentrating on is just this scope. We went from that 15 suppliers to have 92% of our spend with only 7 suppliers. And if you take a look at here, our wire is provided by our sister plant, Lincoln. We have now 2 core raw material suppliers or insulator suppliers as opposed to 7 or 8 suppliers that we had before. Terminals, we've got 1. Inner boxes, we've got 1. And then we've got a scattering of other suppliers that cover the rest of the items. But we've really taken it down so that, again, we can start building, that we did start building that relationship with those individual suppliers. Here I just want to show you a couple things. This is one of our raw material suppliers, rubber insulator, RI Supplier A. A couple things I want to show you is just really the growth that we have had with that specific supplier. 2 key points here. You see a ramp-up session, okay? You see a ramp-up session because we managed the pace of that transition, all right? We did not interrupt our businesses. We managed the pace to avoid that. We also managed the pace to bring those suppliers up to speed. You also see the point, though, where now they have a fairly large concentration of volume. You're going to see ups and downs based on our demand. But again, you took a supplier that was below 4,000 and taken them above 10. Similarly, second supplier, again, same thing you'll notice. We've got an introductory period and we have a constant base with that supplier. Win-win for both. Building relationships, okay? Again, we talked to partnerships. We want to talk about relationships and how key that is to this overall strategy. Talked about building leverage and the fact that if one of our customers has the majority of our business, we'll pretty much do what we need to do to satisfy them. Likewise, now that we've consolidated, we have that leverage within our supplier base. But do we want to go in there with a hammer and start pounding them all and making them do what we want? No, because you're not going to be successful. Ultimately, there's a breaking point. What you want to do is actually build the trust and build that strategic partnership with those individuals, okay? It's going to include touring each other's facilities, making sure they have an opportunity not only to visit your site, but you go and visit their sites. Look at their operations, you know, and see what they can do. Offer them suggestions for improvement and accept their suggestions for your improvement. Meet key people within the organization. Again, this is not just about one purchasing agent or one sourcing manager and one sales rep. This is about 2 businesses working together to ultimately provide satisfaction to the end customer. Okay? You want to meet those people that are actually working on a daily basis to identify what specific materials need purchased, work with meet the shipping folks, the receiving folks, meet everybody in the organization, including engineering, quality, anybody that's going to have some level of interface. You want them to interface. Let them get to know each other. You still want to maintain a focal point. You know, you don't want your engineers going and telling the supplier that they need to make a change, and all of a sudden there's a big price attached to that, and then our sourcing manager, you don't want to see our sourcing manager when he gets into that situation. So you want to maintain that focal point, but you really want to have that relationship so, again, you can work together and have a successful partnership. What we've used is annual supplier conferences that include all key individuals from each of our suppliers and within our plant location. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. The other thing, when you talk about relationships, you share responsibility and accountability. Okay, again, this has got to be a win-win situation. In our cases, we've had many win-win situations where our suppliers and we have worked together to resolve problems. In some environments, if you have a major customer issue, customer recall, they've identified a problem. You know, they're depending on the level of the problem, there may be a significant amount of reaction, maybe some finger pointing. In our environment, we are very fortunate that if we run into one of those situations, we ignore all of that nonsense. The first thing is to take care of business and take care of that customer. We recently had an example where there was a product design change, and that product design change wasn't correct. We had to make a change to that for it to be successful. Okay, we had a bunch of them out in the field, a bunch of them out on the floor that we had to rework. Well, again, there was no finger pointing. The first thing was calling the supplier saying, hey, this is our issue, this is what we need to do. That supplier responding and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do from here, and this is how we'll get you product directly, immediately, so you can go on with production. And if you guys can take care of this in your shop and then ship the rest of it back here, we can take care of it. But it was all about what needs done for the customer. Once that's all said and done, then we talk about, okay, where do we look at the cost? You know, how do we manage the cost of that? But it's secondary. And why is it secondary? Because there's trust involved. We've gone through the relationship building. We've gone through those events that test you and test your integrity. But once you go through that, you build a relationship, it's cake from there. Supplier conferences, as I mentioned, annually, conferences can be such as this, is what we're having here today. In our particular case with suppliers, we've invited those 7 primary suppliers to our facility, typically a 2-3 day event. A couple things included. One is we use it as a forum to communicate results. We talk through month-end, year-end results, what's brought its, where's our performance level at, how have they contributed to it, how are they helping it make us successful, et cetera. We also then talk about strategic goals and objectives and talk about their role and how they can participate in that. You know, our purpose is to share the information, so we're bringing everybody together. Again, one big effort for an end cause. And we're also sharing with them, these are what we need you to do in order to help support that effort. This is how you fit in to the package, okay? Get to know each other on a personal level. The outing that's tonight, our outings, we typically go to a AA ball club and we'll watch a game together or do something. But there's some social activities, again, to help you get to know each other on an individual level, build those relationships and those partnerships. It also provides the suppliers an opportunity to network. Okay, one of the key things, especially starting on, was when we rolled out a change with one supplier, kind of our test model, if you will. Once that supplier achieves success, now you've got an individual in your court that's going to help convey the message and help build that trust within the rest of your supply base and help them see, yeah, this really works. We were scared of it at first, but we worked through it and it works, and they'll help sell it for you. Excuse me. Recognizing outstanding performance. We do this through supplier awards. This Industry Week event is recognizing, it's an external recognition. I think most of us have customers that have their own award program. We have AutoZone, they've got their extra mileage. We have one of our OEM customers just awarded us their Pinnacle Award. We take those seriously. I mean, they are good for us. They're good for our morale. They're good recognition that we're providing what the customer needs. It's encouragement to go forward. It's also a symbol that, hey, we're doing well by them. Well, we do the same thing for our suppliers. Recognize that it's just important for your suppliers to feel that recognition, to know when they're doing well and when they've hit the milestones that you've set. And also, when they're not quite there, they see that others are and they get hopefully a little bit motivated. Or they network and find out, how did you guys accomplish this? How did you improve your service levels? How are you hitting them 99.5%? Supplier report cards provides the basis for our measuring the supplier's performance. We've identified the metrics. We measure them on a quarterly basis. It also provides the background for a formal dialogue between us and our suppliers against those critical business metrics. And it provides a framework for future improvements. The objective is to mutually drive all suppliers to green performance. Now I was looking at this a second time and I'm thinking green, that's a typo. Everybody's thinking green from a green initiative and sustainability. This is our term from a stoplight standpoint. Our supplier report cards provide numeric metrics, but it's also red, green, yellow. Red, there's really improvement needed. Yellow, we need you to pay a little bit more attention, but you're not too far off. And green is gold. You're doing well. We want you to sustain at that area. This is just an example. When you take a look at the slides that were provided on your zip drive, we just wanted to provide an example of a supplier report card. Again, this is not something that is applicable for every environment. For us, we wanted to tackle quality, delivery, inventory management, and productivity, and also provide those goal ranges. Again, letting them know where we want to go. And from this, for example, you can take a look and say, you know, this supplier is great at inventory management and delivery. Okay? They may get an award for it. It also tells us that this supplier really needs to pick up on their quality. It tells them they need to pick up on their quality, that they're not quite to the level we want them to hit. Just a picture of doing an awards ceremony. Again, it's a lot of fun. Typically, it's done within that sphere of the supplier conferences. Supplier feedback, and I've thrown these in a few places just to help reinforce the win-win side of it. Again, a lot of folks go into it and say, "Oh boy, you're going into this just for you," but it actually is a great win on everybody's behalf. They recognize that the supplier report cards have helped them make the improvements in certain efforts and areas. It's challenged them to look at product development and resourcefulness, and really knowing the areas that they need to continue to grow to continue to be that supplier of choice with us. Technical reviews. These technical reviews for us are done on a quarterly basis, and they're the driver of continuous material improvement. Okay? It's a way of leveraging our suppliers' innovation and earlier supplier involvement in our new product introduction process. Okay? How many of you know your business well enough that you wish you could tell the customers what they needed to buy and what quantities and when? And you look at your customers and say, boy, they're building their inventories for no reason. I can support them. Okay? Or the next step this customer needs to go is here. For example, COPs for us, coil unplug. We may look at it and say, we're ignition wire set manufacturers. But our suppliers are saying, you know what? This is the next edge. You guys need to get into this so to keep your ground within your customer base. They see it from a lot of different perspectives. So they can help you know what innovations are required. They can get involved with you immediately from a material product design as you're in that beginning development stages, and again, have a huge impact to safety, quality, and cost from the very beginning. For us, the topics of technical reviews include the material designs, talk about parts consolidations. Again, when you're in an environment where we've got over 1,000 SKUs and you look at a rubber insulator and the only difference between it is maybe one's shaded a dark brown, one's shaded a light black, you look at, do we really need those two differences? You look at parts that essentially are the same except for one may be a 1/4 inch longer. Do you really need that? So they help us work through part consolidations, reduce our overall costs, reduce our inventory base. Standardization, again, very key within that organization. Packaging, shared leverage of raw materials. This is something that you may or may not have thought about before, but for example, if General Cable does a lot with chemical acquisition or chemical purchases materials, well, General Cable Altoona doesn't, but our suppliers do. So can we offer some leverage between General Cable's purchase base and our suppliers' purchase base, offer them then a cost reduction that benefits them, which ultimately reflects in a cost change for us. Supplier capabilities, again, this gets back to developing the suppliers either in terms of improving their quality, their service, their overall cost, improving their capacity, whatnot, but you're taking those opportunities to identify the needs and work through those together. Talk through new business opportunities. SMI, this is a topic that we're going to be covering in just a moment. SMI being supplier managed inventories. Lean. We've included lean training within our supplier conferences. We've talked through lean projects as part of the technical reviews. Dunnage programs. We get into packaging dunnage programs. Essentially, in most of our supplier cases, we return the outer packaging or the carriers of that product. In terminals, all of our terminals are on strips that are wound around cardboard reels. We return those cardboard reels for reuse. Likewise, the boxes that contain our rubber insulators, we've designed the package to facilitate easy opening and closing without using tape and therefore ripping it up, and a method for returning those to the supplier so that they can reuse it, resulting in lower overall packaging costs and therefore overall lower costs for us. We do that with our internal supplier for wire, get wire on steel reels, constant exchange of those steel reels back to them. Talk about payment terms and rebates, freight, some of the more mundane elements of purchasing, if you will. But all of those things can be captured within the scope of a technical review because, again, it's a way for continuous improvement, continuous progress in each of those areas. When we're talking about cost reductions, what we want to emphasize is that we're talking about cost reductions, not margin reductions. This is not about beating up the supplier to tell them, hey, we just need you to give a 3% discount year over year, okay, and leave it at that. We are truly trying to work with our suppliers on reducing their costs, which will thereby reduce our costs and allow them to continue to maintain a good margin so that they can be successful in business. That's where you get into that partnership. We agree with targets up front. When we set up our long-term agreements with our suppliers, we'll talk about what those targets are, work with them throughout it. We share Lean and Six Sigma training. We've had several of our suppliers go through both forms of training, and from that, they've engaged in projects, their certification projects, which have yielded either real quality improvements or real cost improvements to us and their own businesses. Mutual efforts throughout this. And when you talk about out-of-the-box thinking, when I say mutual efforts, your suppliers can come up with a lot of great ideas, okay? Some of those may run into some resistance within the organization at some place. Let's say it's a redesign of a product, and we look and say, yep, we like it, but we're not sure our customer is ready for it. So we're not going to broach that. Instead, we're going to focus on this area. Well, they've come up with a doable idea that for some reason we've chosen not to run with. Well, let's give them credit for it. Okay? Let's help them know that, again, the win-win, we're working for them. If we can't take their idea and run with it, they shouldn't be penalized. But we still do expect them to come up with ideas that we can and do implement. Cost avoidance qualifies as savings. We've gone through a period where a lot of people are raising their prices because of just the marketplace. And in our environment, if we can avoid those cost increases, that still counts as savings to us. From our own experience, I only took this through the year 2000. Right around here is where we started those technical reviews with our suppliers. And again, you keep in mind that 75% of our cost structure is materials. Obviously, if you can go from a point of savings from here and get it up to this level, or right where you're getting annually maybe $800,000 to $1,200,000 or better annually on cost reductions of your material components, that's good for your future. Okay. Going to make a switch now to inventory pull systems. Inventory pull systems, we use forecasting tools for long-term and the short-term horizon, but the day-to-day activities are all managed via pull systems. SMI, Supplier Managed Inventory, has been a powerful enabler for us to reduce inventory and improve our linkage with the suppliers. Suppliers monitor actual inventory levels live. They replenish inventory based on our use, and they decide when, what, and how much to replenish. Okay? When they review it live, it depends on the system you develop for that supplier. We have different systems for different suppliers depending on what works best in that arrangement. In some cases, it's a weekly inventory that we provide to them of what is in our building to them. They look at it based on what their experience with our usage is and what they monitor, the low points or the trigger points, the safety stock levels, et cetera. They'll determine their priorities for producing and shipping to us. It may be a weekly inventory, it may be a daily inventory, it can be electronic, or it can be handwritten and faxed. They'll look at it, they'll decide what to do for us. Some of the characteristics of an SMI system is that it is intended to reduce inventory. It links the supplier to the daily usage, integrates the daily systems, pull systems, eliminates infrastructure, eliminates transactions, and it's visual and flexible. Reduces your lead times. Our success is driven by supplier buy-in to the process, good communication overall, choosing suppliers with solid performance and delivery, with robust inventory management controls, finance department buy-in, raw material lead times were established, have dependable freight carriers, cross-functional process from top down. Okay? Talk about the inventory reduction side of it. This can come either from pure SMI, where they're managing it and they can maintain inventories at a low enough level to continue to satisfy you. You can also look at vendor-owned or supplier-owned inventory systems, where they own the materials that are in your building until you have withdrawn it for use. Again, just some testimonials from some of our supplier partners, talking about their efficiencies that they've gained through the effort as well. I want to talk about infrastructure reductions, and going to do this through using a very quick example. These are the series of steps prior to our engaging in an SMI relationship with our terminal supplier. This is page 2 of that. You can see there's 26 steps that involve a lot of administrative tasks, a lot of material handling, et cetera, throughout the process. What our SMI relationship allowed us to do is to eliminate those non-value-added tasks and then simplify the rest. The result is we've knocked it down to 13 steps that, as you can see, involve little handling, more automated processes, and very much fewer administrative or transactional methods. Results were 13 steps removed, only 12 invoices that year, which is a 50% improvement. 96% of the invoices eliminated. For all of our SMI activities, we've resulted in 2,700 invoices a year being eliminated and over 15,000 inventory transactions being eliminated. Okay, that has allowed us to grow our business without growing staff within our supply chain group, within our material sourcing group, and within our warehouse. So it's had a huge benefit, huge impact to us. And with some testimonials, when you can get your operators on board, again, it shows that you've done something right. And in closing, before I open it up to questions, remind you, as you are going through this effort, and we've talked through different elements that you can include within your own system, develop your own strategy and determine what is important to you. Get all the stakeholders involved, commit to the long haul, consolidate your vendor base to becoming supplier partners, communicating, developing, improving, enjoy your successes, and use SMI. Suppliers say it best in that forging partnerships is mutually beneficial, and it's an exchange of ideas on cost reductions, product quality, and efficiencies. Any questions? Yes?
Did you address issues of financial those suppliers who might be on the verge of going out of business, some have done lately?
Yes, obviously that's one of the important factors when you first look at suppliers. That's going to be one of the key factors, and why you have other stakeholders involved in identifying metrics and things you want to look at to determine which suppliers to follow that path with. That can crop up at any time, and in our experience it has. And so we've had to re-look at that supplier. And again, the first question is, do we need to get out, find somebody different? Do we just need to find a backup? Or how can we work with that supplier to help them in their situation? And the ideal is to continue that partnership, but certainly you've got to mitigate your own risk.
Did you find that they were fairly open in discussing those issues, or were you surprised by it?
I think fairly open, because again, if especially once you're in that partnership, in that relationship, they realize that their financial position affects us, and also there's pretty much no secrets out there. If they don't tell us directly, if they're not open with us directly, somebody is going to. So I think most businesses understand that, and they're going to want to communicate with us first. Also, because we are a large chunk of their business, they've sought to get us involved in helping them through the situation, or at least garnering our support in staying with them through their difficult situation. Yes?
Did you have any suppliers who said, yeah, I like all of this in theory, but the more you get to know about me, the more likely you are to take what you know about me and take it to another supplier and get a better price based on the information you got from me? Did you have any suppliers do that on you?
Yes. I would say, it would be the same in our environment if we were looking at competing with some folks for one of our customers' businesses. You always look at that. I think we were fortunate that with a number of the suppliers that we started with before really the overall consolidation efforts, there was at that point still pretty good communication between the two. You're also looking at, in our environment, they're pretty much, they're stolen designs anyways. In that you've back-engineered from an OEM product design in order to build a set to supply to your aftermarket customers. So really those insulators that are out there, for most part, that product is out there. There's not as much differentiation. There's not much to steal or processes to steal. Certainly, you sign the agreements, the non-compete agreements, the confidentiality agreements, because you're right, I'm sure one terminal supplier doesn't want to have me come in and look at all their improvements just to take them to a competitor. But it's part of that trust-building process. Yes?
How did this affect your internal staffing in terms of skill sets and numbers of people in your procurement?
From a number of people standpoint, we did not choose to reduce staffing at that point. It was actually, I think, at a period of growth so that we were able to avoid staffing increases. I think from a skill set level, it's amazing. I will honestly say that group is extremely talented. They understand pull systems. They understand supplier management. They have really brought not only their knowledge and skill set up to such a great point, that's spread throughout the organization. And we've extended it to different areas. So I think all lean activities, if you truly buy into it and endorse it and it becomes part of who you are, you're automatically a winner. Yes?
Is this better if I use this?
Yeah.
So I think you went through kind of a range of benefits from supplier consolidation, made a compelling case. I guess my question is, what is the flip side? If sort of prompted it, I would imagine you give up things like visibility into other suppliers' prices and potentially some new innovations in the market that don't come from your own supplier. What sorts of things like that might you have thought about in terms of the flip side of consolidating?
There's pros and cons. We've actually, experienced it on an ongoing basis, wanting to take a look at those factors. You know, there's different ways of looking at it. You can look at and say, I'll use a supplier-owned inventory system, for example. What are the hidden costs of suppliers owning that inventory? Is it built into their price to you? And so are you inherently paying for the inventory that they're keeping in your building? Are you truly improving inventory levels overall? You know, we've had suppliers, testimonials that say, you know, you've helped us lower overall inventories, even though we're maintaining offsite inventories in your building. Is that really true? You've got to weigh whether that, you know, certainly if you're focused on relationship with given suppliers, the price issue can be a question. But one of the reasons we've, I think, been successful in countering that is that we continue to look at ways to improve our costs. And the insulators, for example, we have 2 different suppliers in which we may look at product that is best produced in another facility, and we'll give them an opportunity to quote that product, still offering the opportunity to the original supplier to price that. So you can do things in your activities with them through continuous improvement and through looking at, you know, again, within my group of select suppliers, who is offering or who can offer the better cost to help mitigate those concerns. But I think you do want to keep sight of them.
I think you just started to answer that question, but my thoughts were around how do you balance the competitive cost side with the supplier relationships? There's always that pressure to find the absolute lowest cost and yet develop relationship with suppliers, and sometimes those things create a very uncomfortable point.
The distinction I'm going to make to that is I'm going to say what you're offering is the pressure to look at the best price versus the best cost, because those gains that you share through a partnership are what adds to your total overall cost. Meaning I can get a best price from this guy, but do I know what their quality level is? If I wind up having a 20% reject rate, then my cost may have just gone up so where it's no longer competitive with a supplier. If I can't rely on this low price supplier to get my materials to me on time, am I going to face penalties from my customer because I'm not able to service them? And in our case, penalties, I mean, you can get up to $100,000 in a week if you miss a supplier, or I'm sorry, we miss a customer line fill rate requirement. So you've got to take a look at all factors of it. I think when you develop the relationships, the partnerships, they understand what you're looking for. They understand that you need to be competitive and that you're going to continue to look and see if they are still the best supplier of choice. But I really strongly encourage you've got to look at things beyond just price. Realize the impact of quality, of service, of supplier management of your inventory, all of those things, how it impacts your business. And at the very least, understand if you're going to give up those things, what the cost is associated with it, and then make a better decision, because now maybe it is still best price, maybe it is best cost, because what you give up here still doesn't outweigh it.
Over here, Ken.
Yeah.
Jack Pavlik from Swagelock.
Hi.
Have you done the same thing with your MRO suppliers? And if so, would you take any different, steps in your business process that you kind of walked us through?
I would say some things are different, but we do have MRO suppliers that fall within that supplier integration, supplier partnerships, some of which have been organized at the corporate level so that we're able to take advantage of the buys across the North America, and again, increase the leverage, increase the relationship from that standpoint. So there are some Highland Heights directed or corporate directed suppliers that fall within that for our MRO side. We also have local suppliers that we've chosen to do, and in truth, with those, we've also are doing, in some cases, SOI or supplier-owned inventory, doing a lot of SMI where our supplier will come in, they will look at our levels, and they will replenish our stock, keeping within those min-max targets, and again, reducing the amount of transactions and the management that we have to play into it. So yes, it definitely is there for MRO suppliers. We've got a pallet supplier that is amazing in that this individual who builds pallets out of his garage understands pull systems in some cases better than some folks who go through a lot of training. They understood it and said, okay, basically when you get down to a certain level, you just need to you need me to make sure I keep you stocked. I can do that. And it made it so simple. But even on those events, you can use these principles across the board. And on the flip side, wouldn't it be nice if we were able to do that for our customers? If we were truly able to be SMI and not just take over their, in some cases, they'll do VMI, in which we just are the paperwork processing function of their purchasing arm. But what we want to do is we want to be able to say, this is when, what, and how we are going to replenish in order to maximize your ability to service your end customer and maximize our efficiencies within the plant. Good question.
I'd like to know what success you've had, if any, with offshore suppliers developing this kind of a supplier relationship.
The offshore suppliers, I think, vary. There are some that may get engaged in this and support it. There are others that are very afraid of it because of the distance. There's a couple situations. In one of our supply base, we have actually a third-party individual who integrates. They actually manage our inventory, and through that, and they source from various suppliers overseas. We've looked at other suppliers to see whether they have the ability to not only provide the best cost, but to manage our inventory and replenishment systems as well. I think you add the fear factor of not having done it before, and the cost to them and the distance. You really also have to take a look, and again, I'm sure this is not true for all offshore suppliers, so I don't mean to make a global statement, but in our experience, the offshore suppliers' quality levels are not necessarily the same. And we've run into situations where we have done some transitioning, and it has actually resulted in quality issues, service issues. So you just have to be prepared to overcome those things and do a lot of research up front.
Going along with that offshore supplier and actually corporate office versus division location that we have, do you have a metric that you use that identifies the overall cost rather than the piece cost, which from our experience, at least right now, is what our corporate office looks at, and we end up getting a lot of offshore, or at least some offshore parts, that now delivery becomes a huge issue. Quality is an issue, which then causes problems with delivery. So do you have a metric, and how do you deal with, and it sounds like you've got support from your corporate office, how do you deal with that, looking at the overall cost, and you're saying, it's costing us a ton getting this offshore stuff when, yeah, it might have cost 10 cents more to get it from the guy down the street, but we had deliveries every day.
I think it becomes an education process. We don't and haven't tracked the overall cost in a terms of preparing for that comparison. What we've done recently is actually make sure that as we're looking at those different opportunities, to really do some research into our own experiences with transition of any new supplier, as well as issues that we've had with the third-party individual, what they've experienced, and really try and take a look at, okay, this is what our experience tells us, we could run into this level of quality issue, and then this is the impact that it may have on the financial. For the supplier-owned inventory piece, and for a supplier that actually brings in and stores inventory in a local warehouse, we've taken a look at those costs. We've tried to calculate the cost of increased administrative or procurement or transactional costs, and again, to understand what that is so that you can bridge the gap and say, okay, I'm hearing that I've got $1 million savings here and it's going to cost me $500K there. What's the risk? Where do you want to go? And you also have to take a look at, from a risk standpoint, not just a cost, but really the cost of potentially losing a customer. And I think that's been probably had one of the more serious impacts when we've taken a look at it, is you can bridge the cost, bridge the gap, but at what point is it no longer value added? But it does become one of those kind of things. I think as you experience that journey together also, and are open to looking at it from both sides, I think if you're open to looking at it from both sides and you can talk together, work together, and experience this together, I think it's going to come to a point where you're at least, the decision is more of a mutual one, looking at those factors.